So we are reading Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. We are on chapter 15, page number 137 of the book and 155 of the PDF.
Chapter 15, From Energy Block to Physical Disease. Dimension of Energy and Consciousness. Looking at ourselves with a broader perspective than we did before, we see that we are much more than our physical bodies. We are composed of layer upon layer of energy and consciousness. We may sense that internally, a clear graphic description of our self-experience of feelings and thoughts is presented in this chapter.
So basically, we are more than our physical bodies. This is a basic premise and the only dogma that we have in the Monroe Institute also, that we are more than our physical body. Of course, over here, we've read in the previous chapters of the books that there are various layers of the etheric body. I mean, there are many layers in the body that we really have. The physical body is just one of the layers.
Our inner spark of divinity exists in a much higher plane of reality and advanced consciousness than that of our everyday consciousness. We are this higher consciousness just as much as we are our everyday consciousness.
So again, even in Vedantic principles, right, the Atma, or actually we are a part of that higher state of consciousness. And that higher state of consciousness is a part of us. So the microcosm is in the microcosm and the microcosm is in the macrocosm. So everything is integrated actually. It's just that from our level of conscious awareness that we normally exist in, we are not aware of that higher state of consciousness. And all the things that we are doing in awareness are basically to expand our level of consciousness to connect to that higher state of consciousness.
This higher consciousness can be tapped into with practice. Once it is found, it is no surprise. One has the sensation of, oh yes, I knew that all along. Our divine spark has supreme wisdom. We can use it to guide our daily life, growth, and development.
So yeah, so many times when people go and experience these focus levels of focus 10, 12, 15, 21, and so on, they feel that they've already visited those states of consciousness. They are very familiar states of consciousness. And most people in the programs do not want to come back to this normal 3D environment that we live in, this earth life system that we live in, because those states of consciousness feel very familiar and they feel more at home in those states rather than in the state that we normally exist. So naturally, we can tap into those states. We can use it for our growth, for our learning, for our benefit, to get guidance from these states of consciousness.
Since the aura is the medium through which creative impulses from our higher realities are precipitated down into the physical reality, we can use the auric field to bring our consciousness back up in vibration through its layers into the reality of the God Self. To do this, we need to know more specifically how these creative impulses are transmitted layer by layer into our physical world to help create our daily experience of life.
So in awareness, we keep talking about resonance, right? Now, everything is vibrating. Everything has a vibratory frequency. Even the layers in our auric field have specific vibratory frequencies. And through the layers, as we go higher in the layers, the vibratory frequencies are higher. So when to bring it into physical reality, the vibratory frequencies need to be modulated, right? So how do we modulate it? How can we connect into the field? That's what she's saying that she's going to be talking about. So which field resonates with which frequency? And we can actually train ourselves to be able to tune into these specific frequencies, which can be very helpful for our growth and conscious expansion.
First, let us consider again just what the aura is. It is much more than a medium or a field. It is life itself. Each layer is a body, just as real, alive, and functioning as is our physical body. Each body exists in a conscious reality that is in some ways like and in some ways unlike the physical reality. Each layer is, in a sense, in a world of its own, yet these worlds are interconnecting and exist immersed within the same space in which we experience our physical reality.
So what does this imply? Like we have organs in the physical body, each of the organs is also represented in each of the layers of the auric field, right? Like we have feelings in our physical reality, each of the layers is connecting with a mental attitude, a physical attitude, an emotional attitude, and a spiritual attitude. It depends on what layer of the auric field that we are operating from and we are connecting from. That is what the state of consciousness we will be operating from, right? And they interpenetrate and intersperse each other. So there is a connection, but a slight disconnection also, right? So we need to understand this entire field process to really get what is going on in our systems.
Figure 15.1 lists the planes of reality in which we exist and which correlate with each of the auric layers or bodies shown in chapter 7. The physical plane is composed of 4 levels: the physical, etheric, emotional, and mental levels. The astral plane is the bridge between the spiritual and physical, and the spiritual plane is above it and has gradations of enlightenment within it. As already stated in chapter 7, we have at least 3 layers in our spiritual bodies: the etheric template level, the celestial level, and the ketheric template level.
So again, the first four layers are more, or first 3 layers are more connected with the physical body. Then you have the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. And then the next 3 layers are the spiritual body. So you've got 7 layers in the auric field.
Creation or manifestation takes place when a concept or a belief is transmitted from its source in the higher levels down into the more dense levels of reality until it becomes crystallized into our physical reality.
So this is one important thing, right? When we used to conduct the Vastu program, we used to draw a line on the board and say, does this line have energy? Some of you have experienced the Vastu program. Now, so the concept basically is to be able to create the line, you have to think of drawing the line. Then the message goes from the brain to the hands, etc. that, okay, pick up the pen, turn around and draw the line. So every action that has taken place for the line to come into existence is represented by the line. So the line has energy. But the next question is that where did the thought to draw the line come from? So what she's saying over here is that creation or manifestation takes place when a concept or a belief is transmitted from its source in the higher levels, right? So the thought is not coming from the normal, the small guy that we talk about in the Monroe programs, but is actually coming from the big guy, right? This is connected with the higher levels of consciousness. So we are prompted to do anything from a higher state of consciousness rather than the state of consciousness that we normally exist in, which is the small guy, right? Once that message goes, and then you take the action required for something to manifest, then manifestation takes place. If that impulse did not come from the big guy, the small guy would not have even thought of acting. So there was no question of anything being crystallized unless the impulse comes from the big guy.
Creation or manifestation takes place when a concept or a belief is transmitted from its source in the higher levels down into the more dense levels of reality until it becomes crystallized into physical reality. We create according to our beliefs. Of course, what is taking place on the lower layers also affects the higher ones.
So again, everything affects everything else, right? So if an impulse has come to do a particular thing in this physical reality, but we do not follow the exact impulse because clarity of receiving the message is not there, then adjustments need to be made again in the higher states of consciousness to manage whatever has been done in the physical level. So the physical affects the higher states of consciousness, and the higher states of consciousness affect the physical state that we exist in.
In order to understand the process of creating health or disease, let us look more closely at how consciousness manifests on each layer of the auric field. Figure 15.2 lists how consciousness expresses itself on each auric layer and the statement that consciousness makes. On the physical level, consciousness takes the form of instinct, automatic reflexes, and the automatic functioning of internal organs.
So what does this imply? Yeah, so what does this imply, right? We ask this question again in the programs. How much of what is happening in your body are you aware of? Previously, we used to get answers 90%, 95%, etc. But now people are becoming more aware. So we are getting figures more like 10% or 5%. Actually, if you look at us, right, we are not aware of consciously, we are not consciously aware of what is happening in our physical body, even 1 or 2%. Right? Everything is taking place automatically by instinct, right? So there is an underlying state of consciousness or an underlying process which is actually managing our body. So what he's saying, at the physical level, consciousness takes the form of instinct, automatic reflexes, and automatic functioning of the internal organs. We do not have control over how our internal organs are functioning at the physical level or at the state of consciousness that most of us are actually operating at.
Here, consciousness makes the statement, I exist. At the etheric level, consciousness is expressed in terms of sensations like physical pleasure or pain. Unpleasurable sensations such as cold and hunger are signals that something is needed to rebalance our energy in order to flow once again in harmony.
So again, at the etheric level, we are experiencing pain, right? But pain doesn't have technically a physical component. But again, pain tells us that something is not in balance. That's why pain is very, very important. We try to get rid of the pain because it makes us uncomfortable. But if pain wasn't there, then we could create tremendous harm to ourselves and our physical body. For example, a diabetic person does not experience pain in the soles of their feet because of some kind of like they say that the sugar accumulates in the feet, right? Now, if that person gets a cut in the foot, they will not even realize that there is a cut and they can bleed to death. So when we get a cut, we feel pain. Now that pain is very important because it tells us that something is amiss, something is not correct, right? So this happens at the etheric layer.
At the emotional level, consciousness is expressed in basic primal emotions and reactions like fear, anger, and love. Most of these emotions relate to the self. On the mental level, consciousness is expressed in terms of rational thinking. This is the plane of the linear analytic mind.
So again, our emotions are also kept in the auric field, but they basically are manifesting in the third layer of the aura. That's the emotional level. Shivangla, just bring it down, Nikpar. Yeah, bring it more down. Yeah, so you can see what are the levels of the planes, right? So the physical level is automatic reactions. It is talking about instinct, where everything happens on its own. We don't have control over what is happening. At the etheric level, we are experiencing pain and pleasure. At the emotional level, all our fears, love, and other emotional content is managed. And at the mental level, it is the analytical mind, where we are actually analyzing what is happening and taking decisions accordingly. So what is the level of consciousness, or what is the layer in the aura that you are operating more from, also denotes how evolved you are. In continuation.
On the mental level, consciousness is expressed in terms of rational thinking. This is the plane of the linear analytic mind. On the astral level, consciousness is experienced as strong emotions that extend beyond the self and the other to encompass humanity.
So now what does this mean? That if we are operating at the higher level of consciousness, in the astral plane, then focus on the self diminishes and focus of the whole starts to come into play, right? So you're expanding your level. So they say, right, that first you look after yourself, then you look after your family, then you look after your village, then you look after your city, then you talk about your country, then you talk about the world. So you're slowly concern, your attachment, or your what you're working for starts to take a bigger picture when you go into the higher levels of the auric field.
The astral plane, an entirely different world, is the plane where astral travel takes place, and as described by people who have experienced it, that plane differs from the physical plane in the following ways. Objects have fluid form. Light is radiated from objects rather than being primarily reflected off them. And to travel, one need only concentrate on where one wants to go and stay focused on that place. The direction shifts with the focus, so that if you shift your focus, you shift your direction. Concentration power is very important on this plane.
So Robert Monroe also talks about these planes in his book. He talked about these things in the first book that he wrote, Journeys Out of the Body. He started calling it locale. So he called it locale 1, 2, etc. Right, when he went, things were very similar to the physical environment that we exist in, but they were different. Right now, she says that when we are going into these states of consciousness, which is like an out-of-body state. In fact, the out-of-body term was coined by Robert Monroe when his book was published, and it became more something that people used more than the astral travel, right? Astral travel had other connotations, but out-of-body experiences when a person is going into a state of consciousness where they are experiencing things differently, right? So when people went into these states, they found that things were slightly different, although they were similar, but they were very different from what we experience in our day-to-day physical reality that we exist in. Also in these states, clarity of your thought becomes very important, because you're going into thought responsive universes. You're going into thought responsive states of consciousness. So whatever you're thinking will start to manifest. You can be anywhere in split seconds. Split meaning you're instantaneously there. You think of someone and you're right in front of that person. You think of a place and you're in that place, right? So you have to have a lot of focus and concentration in what you are doing. This is really experienced by people who've done the Lifeline program, where we actually go and look for people in the higher states of consciousness. And just by thinking of that person, because each of us has an ID, each of one, and Robert Monroe calls it an ident. You can actually be in any location that you would like to. Okay. We also create something called pick codes in the advanced programs, where you create a ID for a location also, so that it makes it easy for you to get to that particular location whenever you want to. So that's why concentration and focus of intent becomes very important when we are working with these states of consciousness.
On the spiritual plane, there is yet another world.
You missed one paragraph.
Sorry. The differences and similarities between the physical and astral planes would not be surprising to the physicist, since the laws that govern the astral plane would be based on natural law, governing a medium of finer substance, higher energy, and faster vibrations. These laws would, of course, correlate with those we know in our physical world. I propose that our physical laws are, in fact, simply special cases of general laws, the cosmic or universal laws which govern the entire universe.
So everything is governed by some kind of an order, whether we like it or not. Okay, when we look at the chaos theory, they came that when everything is under chaos, there is order within the chaos also. So whatever we are experiencing, the laws that we are experiencing in the material world are definitely going to have higher vibratory frequencies in the higher states of consciousness, but the basis of operation would more or less be the same. Okay, so we have Newtonian physics, then we have theory of relativity. Now we are going into quantum physics, right? So quantum physics is closest to what is happening in the higher states of consciousness. So as we evolve, we also connect to the higher frequencies of what is actually reality built out of. What is reality? What are we experiencing? Is different because it depends on the level of consciousness with which you are experiencing something. So a person operating at a higher state of consciousness will experience reality in a very different way than what a person at a lower state of consciousness is experiencing. But the basis of both the experiences will ultimately be the same. The universal laws.
These laws would, of course, correlate with those we know in our physical world. I propose that our physical laws are, in fact, simply special cases of general laws, the cosmic or universal laws which govern the entire universe. On the spiritual plane, there is yet another world with its own reality, one that seems, from my limited view of it, to be far more beautiful. Full of light and loving than ours. On the fifth layer, the etheric template, consciousness expresses itself as higher will, with which we will things into being through the power of naming and defining them.
Okay, so this is something that people, when we go into the higher focus levels, people actually experience the state that she talks about, that on the spiritual plane, there is yet another world with its own reality, one that seems, from my limited view, a far more beautiful place full of light and loving than us. People actually experience this, Many people have claimed, that their eyes are closed, but there is bright light shining, and they actually open their eyes to see whether the light is there or not, right? And when they open their eyes, they find that the room is dark. But inside, when they close their eyes and they're connecting with that state of consciousness, they actually feel that there's a bright light shining. So when we are going into these states, we are going into these states where there's abundance of light, total compassion, love. That is what these higher states of consciousness actually bring into our states. Now, she talked about the fifth layer also. This is again, as I said, that when we go into the higher states of consciousness, we are going into thought responsive universes. We are going into into places where if you think of it, it will manifest, right? That's why being aware of our thoughts becomes very, very important when we are going into these states, right? So naturally, just by naming something, just by thinking of something, boom, it's in front of you.
On the celestial level, consciousness expresses itself as higher feelings, like universal love. That is, love that goes beyond human beings and friends into a universal love for all life.
So again, we go into a higher state. Now when we are in the etheric plane, we are willing things to happen. But when you're going into that next level, into the sixth layer, you go into universal love. Everything is beautiful. Everything is nice. Uh, everything deserves my love. That kind of a thing. You're totally immersed in the feeling of love.
On the seventh level, consciousness is expressed in higher concepts of knowing or belief systems. This is where the initial creative impulse begins from our knowing, not just linear knowing, but integrated knowing.
So this is the place where we declare I am, that I exist, right? I am there, and it comes from a higher state of consciousness. थोड़ा सा ऊपर करो शिमंगा. ऊपर करो थोड़ा. नहीं, the other way. The other way, go down. Yeah. So now we start from the physical level, right? So it is basically physical level is the physical functioning, knowing that I exist as a physical body, that I am. Okay. Now, there is a I am at the bottom and I am at the top also, if you understand that. Right. Now, the I am at the bottom is more related to the physical aspect of what we are thinking. At the etheric level, it is the physical. Your physical sensations start to come into being. That is pain and pleasure. Then we go into the emotional level where I start feeling emotions. I start feeling love. Okay. Now, love is there at the sixth level also, but the love that you experience in the sixth level is very different from the love that you experience in the second level, right? Here, the love is more self. It is more towards the self. It is more individualized kind of a love. It is a more individualized kind of a hate. It's a more individualized kind of a fear that we are experiencing at the emotional level. At the mental level, we naturally start thinking of concepts. We start analyzing things. We start thinking. At the astral level, we start expanding our state of consciousness and understand that, yes, if something happens to humanity, it happens to me, right? So we need to be careful about what we are thinking and what we are doing. Okay. Now, then when we get into the fifth layer, it is the state of making a statement. It is a state of creating things just through our mental attitudes. If I think of something, I manifest it. The use of the will starts to take place at the fifth layer. This is also the layer, where when we hear the Rishi Munis and all, they used to say something and it used to manifest. They were operating at this fifth layer, right? Tathastu, that they predict, they say something and it manifests. So they're operating with the concept of will. Since I have said it, it will manifest. That is the fifth layer of the auric field. Then you come into universal love, where there is no distinction between anyone, right? So it's very different from the love that we experience at the second level of the auric field. This is universal. You are there for everyone. There is no distinction between your father, your mother, your brother, or someone walking on the street. There's no distinction between an animal and a human being. There's no distinction between an animal and an inanimate object also. You start universally loving everything, right? And then you go into the higher concepts where real creativity takes place. That is where from everything, it is the inception, right? It's the inception of everything that is. So this is where I know and I am, right? Because that's where the inception starts to take place, which is at the 7th layer of the aura.
The basic primary creative force is initiated in the higher spiritual body and is then moved into the astral body. Or, from another point of view, one might say that the finer substances and energies in the spiritual bodies induce harmonic resonance in the astral, which then induces harmonic resonance in the lower three bodies.
So
This process.
So when you look at everything, right? We've been constantly talking about this resonance, harmony, right? So everything that is vibrating, like if you press one key in a piano, you'll find every 7th string in the piano key, in the thing that is at the back of the piano, grand piano. If you open it up, you'll see every 7th string starts to vibrate. So there's the harmonics of things which come up. Now there's a vibration at the 7th layer of the aura, which is the inception, and it creates the harmonics in the lower levels for things to start manifesting in the physical reality as we know it, right? So it's all creation is ultimately based on resonance and harmonics. एक minute.
This process continues all the way down into the frequency level of the physical body. The phenomenon of harmonic induction is that which occurs when you strike one tuning fork and another in the room will sound. Each body expresses this impulse in terms of its conscious reality at its own level. For example, a creative impulse from the spiritual moving into the astral will be expressed in terms of broad feelings. As it moves into the lower frequency layers, it will be first expressed in terms of thoughts, then specific feelings, then physical sensation, and the physical body will respond automatically through the autonomic nervous system. It will either relax if it reads a positive impulse or will contract if it receives a negative one.
So again, we spoke about harmonics, right? So there is this experiment which is done where they have different grandfather clocks in a room, and each of them is ticking at a different level. It's not synchronized, right? You leave the grandfather clocks in the room for a period of time, and you will find that over a period of time, all the clocks will synchronize to the biggest grandfather clock, the one which has the biggest pendulum, right? So the example that is given here is like tuning forks. When you hit one tuning fork and you bring it to the neck to near the other tuning fork, which is in the harmonics of this tuning fork, this one will automatically start to vibrate. So this is what harmonics does, or this is what resonance is all about. The example I gave previously of you press one key on a piano keyboard and every 7th string will start to vibrate because it is related to harmonics, right? So the impulse starts at the highest level, which is at the Etheric level or at the spiritual, in the spiritual plane. And then slowly it comes down the layers, going through whatever each layer is dealing with. And then physical reality comes into existence. Over here, she clearly says that an impulse is created at the spiritual level. It comes into loving levels. Then it comes into that, okay, that I can create it. Then it goes down into thinking processes. That's what we said. When the line came into existence, I had to first think of drawing the line. But where did the thought come from? It came from the higher levels of consciousness, and it created a resonance. Then I am emotionally connected with what I have drawn, and then it comes into physical reality. And then the impulse is there, right? Whether it's an uplifting impulse or a downgrading impulse. And that's where the autonomous nervous system, or we call it the ANS, starts going into action. So the flight and fight response gets activated, or the relaxation response gets activated. We talk a lot about this in the HeartMath, or the Resilience Advantage program by the HeartMath Institute, which deals with stress, right? So is something creating an impulse, creating a stress in my system, or is it creating some kind of a harmony, some kind of a growth in my system? That's how all the impulses come through.
The creative process of health. Health is maintained when the creative force coming from human spiritual reality is directed according to universal or cosmic law. When the Etheric body is aligned with greater spiritual reality, it manifests the divine knowing of that reality.
So what does this mean? If we are in the flow, if we are connected to what we have come here to experience, and everything is in conjunction with each other, we will experience wellness. When we are experiencing disharmony or some kind of an imbalance, that means we are not on the correct track. Basically, that's what it's saying over here.
The statement made is, I know I am one with God. It is the experience of being one with the Creator, yet being individuated at the same time.
So this is beautiful, right? I know that I'm connected with that higher state of consciousness, but I have my individuality, right? But the individuality starts making us do things that doesn't allow us to align with that higher state of consciousness. That is when the imbalance starts to take place. So whenever we are in the flow, we are connected to what that higher state of consciousness wants us to do, right? So the prayer actually should be that allow us to be on the flow, because when we are in the flow, then everything starts to manifest for us in the way that it needs to manifest. The ego steps out of the picture. We can start saying yes to whatever the universe is bringing up for us.
This reality then induces the feeling of universal love in the celestial body. This feeling of being one with God, in turn, creates an alignment of the individual will in the etheric template with the divine will.
So this is exactly what I was saying, right? Our will, that is our egocentric will, gets aligned with the universal consciousness. And that's when the beauty of real life starts to manifest for us. There is no jamela, there is no hankering, there is no attachment. It's a feeling of just being in that state of consciousness.
This in turn is expressed in the astral level as love for humanity. The experience of love for humanity will influence the mental layer and inform the perceptions of reality in the mental body. This vibration in the mental body is then transmitted by the laws of harmonic induction and sympathetic resonance down into the matter and energy of the emotional body, which then expresses itself as feelings.
So again, we are aligning with that universal will, right? So love of the humanity, clarity of thought, emotionally well balanced in center, right? Our entire body then starts to go into homeostasis, which is balance, harmonic working conditions within the body system.
If perception of reality is consistent with cosmic law, the feelings will be harmonious and accepted by the person and allowed to flow. This will not be blocked.
So again, whenever we are not operating in alignment with universal consciousness, we will find hindrances, we will find blocks appearing in the way that we are living, right? The way that we are being. The moment we start aligning to the flow, then things will start happening automatically for us. We will not have to use effort, right? So we keep talking about moving from effortfulness to effortlessness, right? This is the game that she's talking about over here. That when you are in the flow, then things start becoming effortless rather than effortful.
This flow then is transmitted down into the etheric body, which responds in a natural harmony. The result is pleasurable body sensations that promote natural metabolism of energy from the universal energy field.
So now we think that we get most of our energy from our food, but we get most of our energy through our breath, which is actually there. There are these photons of light which are there in the air, which we are actually breathing. And that's where we get most of our energy from. So the result is a pleasurable body sensation that promotes natural metabolism of energy from the universal field, right? So we've heard of these sadhu mahatmas, etc., where they don't have to eat, they don't have to breathe, they just absorb the energy through their skin, right? So when I can metabolize the universal energy, then I don't need to eat, drink, or breathe even, right? I can just be. And that's the state, that's a higher state of spiritual evolution, you could say.
This energy is needed to nourish the etheric body and to maintain its structure and function. A natural balance of the yin-yang energies in the etheric body is also maintained.
So homeostasis, right? When the yin and yang is balanced, we are in balance. There is homeostasis in the body system and it functions effectively and efficiently.
With this balance, the natural sensitivity in the body, coming from the natural flow of feelings, leads to increased awareness of body sensations, which in turn leads to following proper diet and exercise. The healthy etheric body then supports and maintains a healthy physical body in which the chemical and physical systems remain balanced and functioning normally, perpetuating physical health. In the healthy system, the energies in each body remain balanced and support the balance in the other bodies. Health is thus maintained. That is, health attracts more health.
So when we are healthy and all the auric field, in the auric field, there is balance and connectivity between the various layers of the aura, health is automatically maintained. Shivangla, just go back to the last page. Let's go through the chart once. Go down further. Go to the chart in the next page. Yeah. Can you make it smaller, please, so that it comes in one page? That looks small. Yeah. Okay, so now when we start, right, it's a divine knowing when we are operating from the Kentric template. And the divine knowing is, I know I am one with God. Then we come down one level, we go into universal love. Then the etheric template is, thy will and mine are one. That means there is no distinction between you and me, right? Then the astral body is, I love humanity. I care for everyone around me and humanity as a whole. And then when you come into the mental body, it talks about clear thinking and implementing love and my will, right? The next level, the emotional body, when it is flowing correctly, there will be natural flow of energy, which will naturally unblock all things that are blocking the flow that we need to to create health, right? And then it also automatically evokes the feeling of love in our body system. So when you look at it from the resilience grid point of view, we are, whenever we are in this flow of the creative process of health, we are always operating on the right side of the grid and not on the left side of the grid. Okay, the next layer after the emotional body is the etheric layer, where natural metabolism of the energy takes place to maintain the functioning of the etheric body, where homeostasis is maintained. The yin and yang are in balance and we are okay, right? And that results in the physical body, natural metabolism of chemical energies, balanced physical systems, create physical health. So this is the creative process of health. Now we go into the next sheet. Yeah, so this is the dynamic process of disease, but we haven't read it yet. So let's read about the dynamic process of disease and then we will come back to it. If you see the last template, everything is operating from the right side of the grid. That's why, personally speaking, I'm such a fan of the resilience grid. It's not funny. It puts so many things in perspective for us. If we can just start focusing on where I'm operating from in the grid, a large part of all our issues will start getting taken care of.
The dynamic processes of disease. In the disease system, figure 15.4, the same step-down process is at work. However, after the primary creative force moves out from human spiritual reality, it becomes distorted and then acts against universal law. This distortion occurs when the primary creative impulse impinges upon an energy block or distortion within the aura.
So what does this imply, right? If there is an imbalance in the auric field, the primary impulse will naturally start getting wavered. The wavering will start and it will not flow through correctly. So it's like, when you're tuning into a radio station and you have not really tuned into the correct station, you get a distortion in the sound. This is what they're talking about, that the transmission which is coming from the higher states of consciousness gets a little wonky. So the real transmission does not come through, it gets distorted.
As soon as the primary creative impulse becomes distorted on its way into the denser layers of the auric bodies, it continues to be distorted as it is transmitted to succeeding levels.
So if it's distorted at the second level itself, then the distortion compounds as it goes through the various layers. So like Chinese whispers, right? The thing starts to change. What was the original message gets distorted to become totally something different.
I have seen the primary distortions as high as the 7th layer of the aura, where they appeared as tears or tangled lines of light. These spiritual distortions are always related to belief systems acquired in this lifetime or in other lifetimes and are therefore karmic.
So see, again, when we are looking at it from higher states of consciousness, everything is happening at the same time. But whatever we have experienced in our experiences is registered in the auric field, right? So whenever we have experienced something which has created a distortion, it creates an entanglement. It creates a ball of light over there, where when that impulse has to pass through that, it will automatically create a distortion. That's why clearing of our field becomes so important, which is what we do in the biofield tuning sessions. We are constantly clearing the field so that the distortions are removed from the field and we get a clear run as to whatever we need to be doing in this lifetime.
I see karma simply as life experience created from belief systems that have been carried over from one lifetime to the next until they are cleared and realigned with the greater reality.
So again, we are operating from a paradigm. The paradigm is created by our belief systems. I feel this is right or this is wrong. Ultimately, what is the game? We need to transcend our belief systems because that is what keeps us in a box. We need to get out of the box and go into bigger boxes or going into higher states of consciousness.
A distorted seventh layer is related to a distorted belief system. An example could be, I believe I am superior. This distortion affects the celestial layer by blocking celestial love and distorting it. Then the person may love being superior. Light on the celestial level might appear very weak. This will affect the fifth layer of the field, which will be distorted. The person will try to be superior.
So, okay, so if I think I'm superior, I will always attempt to be superior, which naturally will create a problem with people around.
The astral level will respond with the desire to be superior, which will cause blocks or dark blobs of stagnating energy in the astral body. The mental body will give the person the thought that he is superior. Luckily, nobody can fool himself all the time. So sooner or later, the opposite is brought to mind. If I'm not superior, then I must be inferior.
So now this is the cause, right? Most people who have a superiority complex also have an inferiority complex, right? Because ultimately you cannot be superior all the time. So you start feeling inferior. This happens to most people who have a superiority complex.
A mental impasse is created in the person, which is also a distortion in the structure of the mental body. There is a splitting of the life force into two directly opposing currents, and the person falls into a dualistic split. Another example of this conflict is, I can't do it, yet I can do it.
So again, feeling between thought and emotion, right? I can do it, I can't do it. You've had it, right? Because you'll not be able to do it, nor you would not be able to not do it, right? And you'll be stuck dilly-dallying in the middle. Big problem when this starts to happen.
Thus, we have a mental impasse set up in the mental body. This impasse is expressed in energy and vibrations. If the impasse is not solved by the individual, it may become a dissociated thought form and fall into unconsciousness.
So again, then we go into reacting rather than responding, because whenever a situation comes up, we will react in a particular way, right? Because we've got used to being in that state of consciousness or behaving in a particular way when a particular stimulus comes into our field, whenever it comes into our conscious awareness.
This will affect the emotional body through inducted vibration as described earlier and cause fear because the person cannot solve the problem.
So again, simply because of this distortion, you are operating from the left side of the grid and no manifestation will take place from the left side of the grid. So you are stuck in a situation where you are not in a position to solve the issue or take care of the issue that you are actually facing.
This fear is based on unreality and is unacceptable to the person. It is therefore blocked and after some time may also become unconscious.
So what do you mean by become unconscious, right? It becomes a habit, and habits which are not serving us ultimately start to become big blotches in our field, which make us do things which we know at a deeper level that it is not the way to behave, but we will still keep doing it. So like, for example, a person who smokes, he knows that smoking is injurious to health, but cannot help himself because it's happening at an unconscious level. I know people, They are chain smokers. They'll keep smoking, and they won't even realize that they are smoking, right? Because it is happening at an unconscious level.
Since there is no longer a free flow of feelings in the emotional body, where more dark blobs of stagnated or very weak energy will appear, this disruption will be precipitated down into the etheric body in the form of tangled or torn lines of light force. Since these are the lines of force or the grid structure upon which the cells of the physical body grow, the problem of the etheric body will be transmitted into the physical body and become disease in the physical body.
So we have lines of energy which are flowing, right, from the auric field into the physical body. And the cells, the growth of the entire body is based on that. Today, when we are conceived, we are just one cell, right? One ovum and one sperm fusing to form one cell. And then the cells start splitting up and becoming various things. There is no difference between the cell in my skin over here and the skin in my, and a cell in my stomach, but they are performing totally different functions, right? So now what happens? How do they know which function to perform? It is because of these strings of light which form the blueprint of how the body will be working. Now, if there's a distortion in the blueprint, there will be a distortion in the physical body, which is how disease or imbalances start to come into the system.
In our example, this sphere could disrupt the etheric at the solar plexus, causing an overcharge of yin in that area if the person is not able to solve this particular dilemma. This disruption, if allowed to continue, will cause a disruption of the metabolism of chemical energies in the physical body, causing physical systems to become imbalanced and eventually diseased. In our example, the overcharge of yin in the solar plexus could cause increased acidity in the stomach and eventually ulcers.
So again, if something is not mapped properly, it will result in issues which take place. I think we can stop here today. Anyone, anything to say?